All right, everyone, officially welcome to today's webinar on managing pond accounts. I'm going to do a really quick introduction for myself, but then I want to spend a couple of minutes letting the guys that I have with me introduce themselves to you as well, because they're going to be a big part of today's webinar. So we are going to be talking about pond accounts. I am a CINC employee, so I'm not a user of pond accounts. I can help you get them set up, but my guests today are going to be able to help us talk strategy. That's what today's call is all about, strategy on if you are curious about using a pond account, how can you do that? How can you start getting it set up? If you're already using it, are you using it the best way? So we're going to have some kind of high-level discussion on how you can implement ponds better into your business. As I said, I do work for CINC. My name is Cayla Priest. I see a lot of familiar names on our attendee list where you've been joining us for webinars for the past few weeks since we've had to postpone our live in-person events. So we're really thankful that you're here with us. I will have my 3-year anniversary with CINC next month, which is really exciting. But for about the past 2.5 years, I've been doing training. It's really my passion. So I'm very happy that you guys are here to train with us today. I want to throw it over first to Mike, who's going to be our moderator today. Mike, can you say hi to everybody?
Hey guys, my name is Mike. As Cayla mentioned, I will be moderating today. So as you guys are chatting in your questions, I'm going to be making sure that Cayla and our other 2 panelists are going to be able to get those answered for you. So yeah, chat in and I'll get your questions answered.
Yeah, please feel free to chat all throughout. Ask us questions if you need us to clarify something, or if it's even something we haven't mentioned quite yet. Please feel free to throw those in. That's why we're here. We want to make sure you get all your questions answered. So now I'll start with Lance, because in my video list, he's on top. So Lance, tell us who you are and a little bit about you.
I'm Lance.
A little more.
Those that have been around, they probably heard, that have been to the CINC, but those that don't know, I've been in real estate since 2003. Fast forward to about 2013 is when I started utilizing Commissions Inc. I actually got dropped into a completely brand new market in 2006, no friends, no family, and that's kind of where my passion for internet leads have come about. Started using CINC 13 and just started putting some great systems into place on how to utilize it, which is what landed me a position helping clients at CINC in early 2014. Fast forward to 15, I put in a proposal to start the CINC universities to start helping train other agents and teams around the country. And that's kind of led us up to today. And a lot of it is just from talking with other agents. Obviously, we're in the trenches doing it ourselves. We failed a lot, and the cool thing about our failures is we always figure out what we did wrong and how we can kind of move forward with it.
Perfect. Nice to have you here. Thank you.
Thanks.
Doug, you're up.
Hey everyone, Doug Leugers. I'm a real estate broker here in sunny Southwest Florida. My wife and I run a team here. We've been with CINC since 2011-ish, 12, right around there. We started using the pond system as soon as it started, and it's been years. I don't even know how long we've been doing it, but as soon as the idea finally, originally came out years ago, we started using it. Yeah, we run a team down here, and I also lead at the Atlanta training center there. And so I'm just happy to be here with you guys and share what we know, what we've learned thus far.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. I know these 2 are busy, still running teams. So thank you for taking an hour out of your day to help teach everybody what you kind of spent years figuring out. We really appreciate it.
We love it.
Like I said, today is going to be more of a discussion. We're not going to talk about how to set up a pond in your system. We're going to be talking about the tools that you need to effectively manage and run your pond. So we're going to start super basically, because sometimes when we start talking about the pond, we get like a sheepish hand raised and someone says, well, what is a pond? I don't even know what the pond is. So we're going to start super basically and say what a pond is. So as we know, if you have agents on your team, they have leads assigned to them. And a pond account is simply another account that a lead can be assigned to. Only this time, instead of, let's say, leads being assigned to me and I'm the only one that can see them, leads assigned to the pond account have the ability for multiple agents to be able to see them. So what a pond account allows you to do is have multiple agents prospecting on one lead, for example. So instead of me being able to see my 200 leads that I have assigned to me, I can instead see the 2,000 leads in the pond, for example. Hence our title of, do I want to prospect on 200 leads or do I want to prospect on 2,000 leads? That's not a cap, so you can't only have 2,000 leads in your pond. Lance and Doug have thousands in their pond, and it's just people waiting to have that first conversation with the agent. It's people that we haven't had a conversation with yet, or in some cases, maybe we've had an initial conversation, but they're not quite ready to move yet, and so no one's working them one-on-one. Guys, do you have anything further that you think helps explains what a pond account might be?
Not really, not from my side. I mean, you did a great job explaining what it is.
Thank you. So it's named because we've got multiple leads in this pond account and agents can go fishing, right? So it's essentially who's hungry, who wants to go in there and find the business. That's why it's called a pond account. We're going to go fishing for leads in the pond. So at its basic core, that's what the pond account is. So now we get to, go ahead.
I was saying, we have one question right now. We were talking about naming ponds. They're asking, is it coming from a team name or a specific agent or a fake person? How are you naming those in your account when you're setting it up?
It's a great question.
Great question. And I've seen a lot. I prefer to keep it as a team name. I know I've watched, over the years where people have done this and they've tried to come up with some fancy different names. Archivy is one of the ones that kind of come to mind, but the issue that I see with that one is when you connect with a client and then they'll say they come into your office and meet you and they're like, where's Art at? I want to meet Art. It's not a real person, and I feel you lose credibility that way, with that person, even whenever it's a joke. And I've seen some other people just kind of give it a random weird name. You got to remember that whoever's in the pond, they're getting communication from that. So you've got to name it something kind of substantial. So for us, we've kept it like our team name, and we've kind of always had a couple different ponds. So it's always been like a different version of our team name. One might be Nashville Advantage Real Estate Advisors. The other one's Nashville Advantage. And we just try to keep it consistent that way.
Doug, I know you do something similar, so tell everybody how you name yours.
Yeah, I agree with Lance. You don't want to do anything in terms of being a fancy name. Another option would be, like in our case, we named our pond after my wife, Lona. So Lona's got a regular sign in that she signs into our platform, but we also created, another Gmail address and everything for our pond account. And so everything's coming from Lona, the team leader. So that's who people think they're communicating with.
Yeah, and that's really that's the two that I've seen people do most often, a real name, and it works well, like for Doug, if it's someone that actually exists. So if they do ask for that person, they can talk to Lona. And then Lance is the other way, where you can name it after your team name. So all the communications that are automated in there are coming from that team name. And I see a question from Brooks about using multiple pond accounts. That's something we're definitely going to touch on a little later. So we'll definitely get to that. So now we get to go into the fun stuff, which is how do you kind of present this to your team almost, right? So like if you're currently not using it, or you're using it and you know that you're not using it well, how do we get everyone on board and make this work really well? So let's talk kind of briefly about how you can pitch the benefits of pond accounts to your team, and also how you can kind of find out if this is something that's going to work for you. So the first thing I have here is that it improves communication to the leads. Lance and Doug, I think you guys kind of do something similar in that all automated communication in the pond account, it doesn't come from the agents, it comes from the pond account. And so talk a little bit about how you decided to do that so you can kind of streamline what the leads are getting.
Well, let's back up really quick about the benefits of the pond. And kind of communicating it with the agents. I think that's kind of where we first started going with this one.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can talk about the communication. But,
Sure.
I go way back to, this was even before the pond, like we had to MacGyver the pond to make it work in our system back 2014. And I had an agent that left me, and it was another great agent down in Florida at the time that I was doing training with. And he's like, dude, you need to start doing this. And I struggled because I had some other great agents that had, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 leads in their personal account. And I was like, well, how am I going to pull it away from them? But when we dug deep, we realized that of those 2,000, 3,000 plus leads they had, they were only efficiently touching 15, 20, 30 of them at max on a good agent. The rest of them were sitting out there. And I call it kind of like, like they're in Halloween season and stuff like that, when you look out in the pumpkin fields and you just start watching these pumpkins drop. And I was like, how do we get away from that? And that's where the benefit of this came was, I realized, I told my agents, I'm like, look, you're not giving up 2,000 leads. You're gaining access to 14,000 leads because everybody's putting them in the pond. And then, the thing, and it was a trial and error for us kicking off. We had to, and so many different rules, like you don't know what rules to put in play until you start playing with it. Mm-hmm. And, right away we realized phone calls only, no texting, no email, no voicemails on anything in the pond because we don't want to overwhelm them. Why do we not want them to text message and email? Well, if we control it, one, it's all coming from one source. We're controlling what that communication says. And if I let my agents, imagine you're a lead in my system and all of a sudden 5 of my agents all email you answering the same question and they answer it different ways. So, we just said phone calls only. So that's greatly improved our communication because we're more consistent with getting our message across.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and we're going to talk a little later about rules for the pond. And so we'll definitely talk about how many leads do the agents actually get to have in their own bucket and, how do they claim them out of the pond. So I love that you kind of went down that avenue because that's definitely something we're going to touch on. Doug, do you do anything differently in terms of how you allow agents to communicate in the pond?
Not actually. It's pretty much the same as Lance. It's important if you're going to use the pond that you do keep communications consistent, because if you don't, it gets really confusing for our consumers or our customers or prospects, and we definitely don't want that. So we only allow the phone calls like Lance said. If there is texts that come in, we still try to call them and we may reply to a text, but always the mission is to get them on the phone.
Yeah, I love that. And I think too, it not only improves the communication to the leads that are in the pond, I also see improved communication to the leads that are assigned to the agent. So if I've got, and we'll talk a little later, if I'm allowed to have 30 of, my top leads assigned directly to me, it's improving my communication with those people because now I can focus on them a little bit more, right? Whereas now I'm not overwhelmed by, 400, 500 leads. I've got people I'm really honed in on.
Absolutely. Actually, what it does is it doesn't take the 500 leads away from an agent. Now, the way I like to explain it is because agents, they want all the leads. They just give me leads, right? So why are you going to take my 500 away? Well, the answer is we're not taking 500 leads away from you or however many are assigned. We're actually going to give you access to the whole database. So instead of just giving my agent access to the 500 leads, I give them access to 20,000 leads. So what would you rather have access to? And the obvious answer is 20,000 leads. But the only ones they don't have access to are the leads that are already claimed by someone else. And we'll talk more about that, right?
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk a little bit about how it can create that competition. Instead of just giving leads to agents round robin and kind of letting people slip through the cracks, have you found that it creates that healthy competition among people?
Yes, absolutely. But that's a culture thing too. So that could get out of hand, I imagine, if you don't monitor that, right?
Well, so I mean, it does create more competition. Well, here's where I'll say, it allows us, those that want to flourish to grow. Those that don't, they step aside and find something, maybe a greeter at Walmart or something like that. You know, they find something that's more suitable for them. So I like it for that aspect to say, you know, our stronger are going to survive. You know, they used to always say, oh, it's not fair, you got to do a round robin. No, I'm not all about round robin. Not only that, but, you know, here's where I've come across, and I think most people can relate. You know, we've got a team of different personalities. I mean, look at our training team, right? We've all got different personalities, but we've
sure
all, and you know, but we need those different personalities to succeed. And that's the same thing in our organization. But when I used to do a round robin, I might have a lead that wants to relate to this personality, but that agent that they're assigned to is not necessarily it, right? Now that they're in a pond, it opens the door now to get the right personality in front of that person. And, you know, and a lot of that's done just, you know, from nurture and follow-ups and having the whole team be able to have access to do those follow-ups.
Yeah. Now, a question that I get a lot when I'm doing in-office training is, well, I have someone that just always, you know, causes a fuss, and I've got someone that's just not going to like this. They're not going to like the competition. As a team owner, as you two are, what's your response to that?
Walmart application.
One way. That's the blunt way.
Yeah. Really, I think the competition's only there if you create that competition. I mean, what the pond is, you know, is the ability for someone to work as much as they want to work. So really this is the opportunity for a superstar to really shine, because they can get in there and work as many leads as they want to work at any given time. And from a team owner standpoint, we can easily identify, one, who is working, and two, you know, who the hot leads are in our database at any given time.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers the question. Is that what you were looking for?
No, for sure. Yeah. Just, I think too, it's a great time to think about the culture of your team too. Have you made a space for people with negative attitudes where you could have, you know, nipped that in the bud a long time ago? This can be a way to identify those people.
Well, and kind of even coming in and depending on how you want to run your team, you know, and this has been a realization that I've known for years, but it's really just been more sinking in over the last year. You know, everybody's got their own ability, talents, passions of what they like. You know, you got somebody that might love making the phone calls and doing those relationships, but they hate going out showing houses. Well, at that point, then you can start looking at your team and say, well, wait a minute. You know, I've got some agents on my team that despise picking up the phone. And all they ever say is, put me in front of the lead and I'll close them. So we say, okay, so that's what we do now is we've got, you know, whether it's us, some of the other tools that we utilize for automation, but we get these appointments set up then, and then we just turn around and say, here you go, agent. You no longer have to prospect. You no longer have to do this. Now, we do have people prospecting. I don't want people to read that the wrong way. You still got to prospect, but now we're able to take a couple agents and split up the job duties.
Yeah. Let people shine with what they're good at.
Yeah. You love showing houses? Cool. We'll find some appointments, and all you have to do is show houses.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, and really this goes hand in hand with that third point then. It just rewards those people who are consistently working and will help you pick those people out who maybe would be a better fit for another role on the team, which I think is a great benefit that a lot of people don't consider before they might start implementing this. Not everyone has the same personality and the same skill set. So if you expect the same out of those people and you consistently see that they're not hitting the goal, that's a great coaching opportunity to have a talk with them about what their passion really is. So I really like that benefit of the pond. Cool. So here's something that I think we can spend some time talking on is before you create a pond, this is not something to go pitch to your team and say, okay, I just created a pond account and we're going to start working in it. Okay, go. You got to have a little bit of forethought and you have to have a real process down. So one thing that I find that a lot of team leaders kind of lack is having some sort of agreement with their team over what the expectations are And then on the other hand, what the consequence is of not meeting those goals and expectations. So can we talk a little bit, and this would be a good time, especially for people to take notes if you've got paper, so you can kind of get some ideas. Tell me a little bit about what the kind of overall goal is of you having a pond account, and then a little bit about the expectations that you have set for the agents to meet.
Okay. Lance, you want to start? Or
You can go ahead, start.
Okay.
Ooh,
So
everyone's being a gentleman.
you want to, so the goal is to increase our amount of contacts per lead, right? So if you've been to CINC University, you've seen where we've talked about the Harvard study that was done that says our chances of converting a lead are so much higher when we consistently prospect and when we have a high number of touches within a short window of time.
I actually
And
have
so,
that up right here.
Oh, you do? Awesome. And so what the pond does for us is, from an owner standpoint, and the agents love it too, right? But from an owner standpoint, it gives us the ability to make sure that our leads are being followed up within that 5-minute period. That's really, really mission critical, and also to make sure that they're getting the amount of contacts in that short amount of time. And when I say short amount of time, like our goal is to hit to contact or attempt to contact every lead, 14 times within a 7-day period, twice a day. And so that's the goal for us, is to increase those contacts. And then what was the second part of the question?
Do you have specific metrics that you hold people to, as in terms of how many prospecting calls they make or something similar to that?
Yeah. And so right now everything's kind of out of the window, right? With COVID, things are kind of a little bit wiry, but it's actually also a good example of what we're talking about with the pond, because we have this situation and every area is different. But right now on any given team, there's a certain amount of people who are willing or able to work. And those people can work right now, and those leads that are still flowing into everyone's system can get contacted by those people that want or can work. Mm-hmm. And so, but the specific metrics that we're looking for in an ideal environment is we'd like our agents to at least make 100 dials a day. I like them to be prospecting that 2 to 3 to 4 hours a day, however long it takes to get dialed that many dials. And the reason those dials are important is just because it takes dials to get contacts. But the metrics that we really pay attention to is how many people did you actually speak to today? And normally if we speak to 5 to 7 people a day, we're our agents are converting and closing 2, 3, 4 deals a month.
I got a question for you, Doug.
Mm-hmm.
And this comes up a lot, or I think some people misunderstand, like whenever we talk 100 dials a day, is that 100 prospecting, or do you have a different metrics for your nurture and follow-up?
Awesome. Yeah, great question. And so, yeah, when we're talking about prospecting, I'm talking about going after people who have not been spoken to before. So we would put our follow-ups in another category. That happens at a different time of day, usually around that noon, 1 o'clock, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I need 3 solid hours of going after the new leads coming in, or people that
we're the same way, but we're the same way. And I think a lot of people, though, they're like, well, I made a lot of calls today. And I'm like, awesome. How many did you make? 20. And I'm like, cool. Who did you call? Well, we followed up with some of our people, but that was follow-up. That's a completely different metric from prospecting. I mean, we're similar with you, but where we've kind of taken it is, I've realized every agent has different goals, personal goals that they have. And for me to try to hold an agent to my own personal expectation and, a goal that I want them to hit, if it's not something that they're set on, I can't hold it to them. So we just kind of reverse engineer for every one of our agents to say, all right, well, where's your goal? How much money do you want to make in real estate this year? And we build a plan around that. And that's what we hold our agents accountable to, is their own personal goal plan.
Yes, I love it. And so what we've, and Lance, I know you probably agree with this, but at least in our platform, we found that they hit that 100 dials a day or around that mark on average, they'll hit those 2 deals per month. And but if their goal is something different, we definitely, like you said, reverse engineer and get to that point where they want to be at. So
Well,
definitely,
we've had this come up as of recently too. Sometimes when you got too little of a dial, and you're not making, those that are only doing, 10, 15 calls a day, you're probably doing yourself more harm at that point than you are good, because then it's not consistent. And, when I look at that, like that salesperson that, they just kind of haphazardly come by and they're like, hey, and they connect with you, but then you're like, yeah, man, send me this information. And then they disappear. I mean, I had insurance quote the other day. Ava and I being out to my property, and a lady called, and back in August, I was online wanting to reduce some of my car insurance. And she's like, hey, I don't know if anybody ever got back with you. This is back in August, and you're just now getting with me. But I was like, you know what? Yeah, go ahead and send it over. And then I'm like, oh, hey, I need it for my motorcycles as well. When I get home, I emailed her all my policies. I'm like, when you get it together, email me your quote. I did that Thursday last week. I didn't get that quote. She's tried calling me other times, and I finally got the quote today in the email. And I was like, inconsistency, right? So when you don't put that much effort in, or the inconsistency, you're not doing anything. It's like going to the gym and getting on the treadmill for 10 minutes every couple of days. You're not doing enough to, if anything, you're just going to make yourself mad and quit.
So I think we're leading into the other part of this that I wanted to touch on, which are the consequences of not meeting these goals, whether it's a team goal, team-wide, or it's more personalized, whether it's not following the process that you have outlined in your manual of working new leads, in terms of adding notes and reminders and labels and all that good stuff. When you see people not meeting those, tell me some consequences that you have of how you correct that behavior.
Walmart application.
So what Lance was saying earlier about, it's really important about focusing on that agent's goals, and 110% agree. And so, I used to be that guy that if an agent said they wanted to make 100,000 a year, like they all do, but was then you come along and you find the truth is they're happy with 12 deals a year. I used to get pissed off at that. Right. And it was, but I don't anymore. So if an agent is happy with doing 12 deals a year, I'm happy with it too. I'll just hire more agents if I need more agents to get the deals that I need to get. But to answer your question, so first off, it's important that you sit down, and we have a vision board party for our agents. So we know exactly or have an idea what makes our agents tick, what their motivations are. And then we have a weekly one-on-one with each agent. And in the one-on-one, we go over their numbers. So we look at their database. We see who's in their keeps, their hot keeps, and what the status of all those are. And then we make sure all their reminders, this goes along with this question, is we make sure the reminders are not past due. So that's one of our important metrics that we track. It can't be more than 3 days past due. We used to do 7 days past due. Now it can't be more than 3 days past due. Because if you're falling past due on your reminders, then you have too many leads. And then the next part is for an accountability standpoint, why we're talking to them. We go ahead in that one-on-one and we set next week's goal. So from Wednesday to the next Wednesday, how many dials, how many people are you going to speak to, and how many appointments are you going to set? And we have them set their goal according to what their vision is and what their yearly goal is. And then my next question is a big one. I say, what are you willing to do if you don't hit that goal? Right? And this is where it gets a little bit challenging, because this is where the agent goes, well, I have to come up with something that is painful enough, but I got to make sure I hit my goal. So it makes them really think. And so as an example, we had yellow letters that we were delivering door to door. So, and it was more about the cash buyer thing. We have a cash buyer program at our brokerage, but no one wants to hand deliver these things to people's houses. Right. And so I'd hire delivery guys to do that. Well, now Now I have my agents do it as an accountability thing. They're like, well, no, I wouldn't want to do that. So we have them, to answer the questions, you got to set an accountability standard in there for an agent that is painful enough that they will move away from that pain and accomplish the goal that they set, if that makes sense.
For sure.
And you can have fun with it, like wash my car. And so I got Connor on my team. I said, look, if you don't hit your goal, then you have to go Facebook Live, and you got to wash my car Facebook Live. But while you're on there, you have to explain to everyone why you're washing the car, right? So there has to be a level of, you can have fun with it, but there has to be a level of embarrassment, or there has to be some kind of pain, like I was saying, to be associated with it. And that works pretty well, but they come up with the accountability, not me.
Yeah.
So
we were kind of that similar, Doug, that whole 7 days behind on overdue, and a handful of our mastermind attendees that show up, that Shane, Dwayne, a few of them, they all got on me one time, and it clicked, and they like, what you allow is your new zero. And so, if you allow 3 days overdue, that's your new zero. Why not just keep it at zero? So it was just before Cabo Mastermind, we started implementing that to say, like, here's the new zero. So for us, where those consequences come into play are, one, and it's tied to the goals, but if they're not doing their follow-ups and they're nailing it, we will take what we would normally give them as their maximum number of leads in their personal account and start reducing it, because you obviously cannot keep up with all of these people. So for me, I turned it around and said, I'm doing you a favor by taking some work away from you to make it easy. So, zero is our new number. Do we, if you went into my site right now, is there going to be some overdues? Yes, but just know that those get addressed. That's our hot button right now that we're really pushing on, and, pay attention to the agents, so they are not getting overdue anymore.
Yeah. I love both of those. So a question that I get a lot too when I'm talking about this with other team owners is, well, I'm still in production, and I know you two are mostly out of production, if not completely. So a lot of people say, I'm still in production. I have to produce to meet my goals. And I just don't have time to do that one-on-one, type of accountability check-ins. What's kind of your advice to people in that, beyond work to get out of production? What can they do today to try to rectify that?
If you say you don't have time, it's not enough of a priority for you. You're not going to break through that barrier and get to the next level if that's what you're looking for, if you don't make time to do that. Look, we've all got the same 24 hours in a day. It's how we manage it and how we utilize them, right? So, you've got to be able to put it in. For me, one of the things that helped me out was, I brought on an operations manager. A lot of you guys know him, Matt. He helps out with Doug and Cayla at the Atlanta Training Center, and he's phenomenal. So he helps pick up some of that slack where we don't. So now I'm more dealing with him, and he's still in production. So, here's the deal. He's in production. He's running training with CINC, and he's running a lot of the stuff. So, again, it's to say you're still in production, I think, is just kind of creating an excuse. And, I not trying to be mean or anything like that, but I had the same successful people tell me the same thing is, you've got to find a way to make time for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's one of your primary responsibilities as a leader and as a team leader is to lead people, and you can't lead them if you don't hold them accountable and know, but how to lead. Yeah.
So Joe actually put something in the chat right along those lines, saying, you're not a leader, you're a producer if you don't do those meetings. And then he asked a great question.
I like that, Joe.
So do you take leads back from people if they don't follow up?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now what we do with those, and where do they go sometimes? And a lot of that, it's all based on, where that leads were. Most of the leads that we take back are leads that, that have, as we say, fallen on the ground. If there looks like there's still an opportunity, we will pass them off into another agent. Otherwise, we'll throw them right back into the pond where as a whole group and team, we can nurture.
Perfect. Yeah, and Andrew had a great anecdote in here too, kind of talking, Doug, to what you said about those accountability meetings and what are you willing to do if you don't meet that goal. He said 9 times out of 10, the agent will author a consequence for non-achievement to be much tougher than you could, especially if they are talent.
Yes, they will. That's a great point.
I'm glad my parents didn't know that rule when I was a kid, though. And then Joe, I see your follow-up question. We'll get to that a little later in the Q&A at the end. So I love that. That's some great kind of nuggets to give people listening to think on in terms of presenting this to their team. You have to have these things decided before you implement the pond. Change management is kind of the blanket term in thinking of, okay, I'm presenting this change to my team. How do I get everyone on board? A book that I think is really good to read on that, if you're not quite sure how to kind of implement change within your team, it's a really simple, short book called Who Moved My Cheese? And it's great to try to kind of teach you how to manage those changes within your team. And if you're not willing to do the work up front, don't create a pond because it's just going to spin out of control. So this is a big important.
See, I'm the other aspect around. I have agents that have told me, they're like, Lance, I'm just a single agent. Do I need a pond? If I went back and started all over again and it was just me, I would do a pond. Even if I was the only agent working out of it, because then that lets me, well, one, it allows me to grow into something and not have to make changes if I decide to grow. But what that also lets me do is make my day a little bit easier. I know anything in the pond is my prospecting, long-term nurture. Anything assigned directly to me is my next paycheck. So even as a single agent, I would still run the pond.
Perfect. Yeah, I love it. So let's talk a little bit about.
Before we jump in there, just had a couple questions that are related to creating, like, right, what the steps you do before you create the pond.
Yeah.
So one that I know we get all the time is, do we have a sample lead share agreement that you will share?
Mike, if you'll put in the chat, there's a special link that was created, cincommunity.com/resources. I have an example of some things on there. So cincommunity.com/resources.
Perfect.
And they can hit that up. And then also I would say post on the CINC Owners Mastermind page and ask if people are willing to share snippets of theirs. I think that could be a great discussion that we can have on that Facebook group.
Okay, so I just posted the link in there. The other question is, let me find it right here. It has to do with what leads you put into the pond, how many leads are in the pond, do you have multiples or do you consolidate into just one, and kind of do that. And then the rest of the questions are about working it, so we'll get those a little later.
So yeah, talk to me. I think that to kind of answer this question, talk to me about how you do lead routing. So do you have leads go to agents and then go into the pond, or vice versa? Do you have them go into the pond first and then assigned out to agents as they make contact?
I look at, I go back and I say the number one thing I got to focus on outside of work for us is what the consumer experience is. And so we've played with this multiple different ways. We've done a lot of different things. And, you know, at the end of the day, and Mike will tell you, I mean, because, you know, Mike handles all my personal lead routing because he's the one that has to deal with me at training every time, right? And he finally hit a point, he's like, Lance, quit touching it. If you need it, let me know. And so we always end up going back that. But, you know, I tried the round robin, right? Where I'd go to the agents first. Well, the consumer then gets, or the lead gets an email from agent A. And then agent A doesn't do anything with them. So then they go back into the pond. So now they're getting it from the pond. And then let's just say agent B connects with that lead and they're communicating and things are going well. And then fast forward a little bit, that lead turns around and finds an old email from agent A, still on the same team, and they respond to them. Now I've got, like this lead doesn't know who to respond to because Now they're getting, multiple emails over a course of 4 weeks, 6 weeks, a year, whatever that is. But now you've got the lead communicating with an agent over here and also this other agent. So now how do I, as a team leader, say, this is the person that gets it? So to me, that's created a lot of issues in there. How many leads go in the pond? All of my leads go into the pond, except the only thing that doesn't count. So my agent's SOI is their SOI. That doesn't count towards any of our pond minimums. So we take into account for that, but I'm going to tell you, most of my SOI is even in the pond, because I want to have that to be created as an opportunity and to fall into any of our prospecting campaigns whenever they come in. Once the lead sells, so Cayla, you're one of my agents and you sell a lead, a house, the day it closes, they go back into the pond, and that's where the after sale follow-up and nurture falls into play. So for us, we keep everything within the pond. And
yeah, so when we're talking about pond leads, we're talking about company leads, right? We're talking about leads that the company produced through advertising. It could be CINC leads, it could be leads from other sources, but it's not SOI or something that your agents have produced themselves. So you can make that distinction for your agents too. I'm not touching anything that you've produced yourself. This is just company leads that I paid for is what we deal with. And so Lance, I think you do it pretty similarly, where everything comes into the pond first. So no more round robin out to agents, pond first.
No,
and
everything goes right into the pond.
Everything goes right into the pond. So I hope that answered your question. Let us know if it didn't. So let's talk about managing the pond now, because I have seen a couple of questions pop up about do you do, on times or up days or call times? So I'd love to hear, Doug, if you could talk to us a little bit about how you manage this. Do you have all agents calling all the time? Kind of talk to us a little bit about that, if you will.
Sure. Ideally, all the agents would be calling all the time. It doesn't really happen that way, but our ideal world, what happens is we'd like to have our agents in office in our headquarters from 8 to 10, calling in our leads, calling in the pond. And what we generally do is we have somebody quarterback who's calling what leads. Because one of the big concerns that we always hear is that we don't want several agents calling the same lead. Me, I don't really care about that as much, but if that is a problem for you, this is how you solve it. You have somebody quarterback who's calling what leads. So we all know, or should know, that your most important filters in your whole database are your P1s, P2s, and P3s. And so what you can do is, like for us, if you're worried about people calling over the top of each other, is just have one person call this filter, another person call another filter. And this encourages, when you do business this way, encourages that collaboration among your team, which is a good thing. You want your team to collaborate. And so we have Lona will basically tell Connor to call P1s and P2s, because normally there's not that many P1s, but he'll hit the P1s and P2s, possibly P3s, and then Faye will go in and call another filter, and then Lona will call another filter. So that we got a good spread. We're hitting all the leads, right? And that's generally how we do it.
Now, what about brand new people as they come in? Everyone who has access to that pond account gets notified at the same time, correct?
Yes. So when a lead registers, everybody gets notified. You can set that up right through the platform now. And that was an awesome build out that I was really happy about. And so, yeah, everybody gets notified, and the first person to get on it can work that lead, they get on it. That's what we're trying to accomplish, is increase that speed to lead, which we know is one of the most critical parts of this.
Yeah. Lance, do you guys do things any differently?
We're pretty much that same thing. I mean, everybody gets notified, and and it's that speed to lead. I think some of the misconception with some of the agents that we had to get over with is, well, I'm the one that made first contact with them. Just because you made contact with them doesn't mean that they end up going to you per se, because you weren't able to convert them. But yeah, I mean, we're Yeah, we pretty much that same thing of, everyone gets notified. We work our call filters. We've got some additional ones that we've built out, people that haven't logged in 30 to 60, 60 to 90, we share those little tidbits at the CINC that are just those little extra things that, we personally do on our team. So, yeah.
It's actually a great segue into how does an agent claim a lead out of the pond? What's that look like? What do they have to have with that lead to claim them into their own bucket?
For us, it's they got to have a good conversation. So one, we require our agents to either use the dialer or the mobile app to make any of their phone calls. If I catch them just manually dialing it through a desk phone or their cell phone, they lose privilege immediately. Like that's a zero tolerance for us. And a lot of people are like, why? Well, one, we have the tools and the ability, right? I mean, right from my cell phone, I can swipe and dial. So it's the accountability within the system that logs everything. I like the dialer better though, because it tracks the length of the conversation. So our agents, they have a good conversation with them. They'll put in good notes that cover the why they're moving, when they're moving, and a little bit about what they want. If we don't see two of the W's in there, meaning like the why and what, it doesn't go. I let the agents transfer it on their own until I realized agents were trying to cherry pick and abuse the system. So we took, and they totally did. So we took that away, and now what they have to do is they can tag Matt and myself in the note. So if it's somebody they want transferred to them, they tag Matt and myself at the end of the note to say, please transfer. One of the other requirements though is, this has to be somebody that's going to be one of their next 20 to 30 paychecks, meaning they're buying in the next 30, 60, 90 days. If it's somebody that says, well, they can't buy for 12 months out, they're staying in the pond, right? I want my agents to focus on their next 20 paychecks. Mm-hmm. So
I love that.
So they alert us to do that.
That might be a good segue into my next slide, which is
what is well, I'm curious I'm curious to see if Doug does anything different on claiming the leads. I ain't heard how you do that in a while.
Yeah, no, I do it pretty much the same. In order, it's loosely. So if an agent is really passionate about a conversation they have with somebody and they really want that person in their bucket, I'll let them move that person in their bucket, as long as they convert them. They got some of the why, or preferably a lot of the why, and the when and the what. What they're looking for. So same thing.
Perfect. So I'll give a little anecdote. And anytime I'm doing training in office, and I ask, I'm thinking that this team might be a good fit for a pond account, but they're not using it, or they're using it and they're not using it very well. I always ask, how many leads could you work at any given time? Where if I sat down and asked you, how many could you actually be able to tell me a little bit about that person? So I know that you truly have a relationship with them. So I know that you know what's going on with them. I've never gotten a number more than 30. Most of the time I hear 15, I hear 20, I hear 25, but I've never heard more than 30. And then when I ask them, well, then how do you actually manage the 460 that you have assigned to you right now? That's when they kind of say, well, I'm not. I'm not managing those 460 very well. And so that's where this top 20, or whatever the number is for you, system came about. So Lance, maybe you could talk to me a little bit about kind of how you guys arrived at the number that you guys use and how that works.
Well, and I'll tell you, that number is forever shrinking, right? Mm-hmm. It started with, well, I take that back. It started really small at first, like 15. Mm-hmm. And then we let it grow. But then what we realized is, and this goes into those weekly meetings like Doug had spoke about with the agents. And part of that meeting is telling me the information about the leads that you're currently working. And here's what's interesting. And in fact, Matt and I just did this with one of our other agents not long ago, because his were starting to grow a little bit. Like when we say 20 to 30, that's a baseline. And because if you're a rock star following up, I don't want to hold you back. I'll let you have a little more. Some aren't. But every one of our agents, whenever we went through and started asking them to say, hey, give me an update on every lead that you're working, where they're at, what their, what their time frame is, what their motivation is. Do you know the most number of leads and agents come back and told us specific information on is?
How many?
7.
7. Wow.
And these are people that have 20, 30 leads in their account. And I'm like, all right, well, what's going on with the other 20 some leads? They have no idea. You ask them questions. I don't know. I don't know. And I'm like, all right, well, if they can't answer that question, you got to ask yourself, do they belong in there? And for us, so, I mean, we've been really, that's my focus this year is really to say, if you don't know, then they're going to go back into the pond and somebody else is going to find out. Now you have an opportunity to get them back if they're in the pond, but yeah. How about you, Doug?
Yeah, Doug, tell us how you work that.
Yeah, it's the same way. We're like at 15 now, 15 leads, 15 hot keeps, but it's more of a guideline than it is a rule. And so if somebody's just crushing it and they're keeping up with their reminders, they're making calls, they're culture fit, they're coming to our meetings that we have weekly, and then they're having the one-on-ones, they're showing up for our daily huddles, all that stuff plays into it. And so as long as they're doing those things and staying up with their leads, I might increase them to 20 or 25, but it's all based on how that agent is performing.
Mm-hmm. And so too, if you had maybe a newer agent that came on that was brand new to the business, you could start them out with a smaller number and kind of slowly increase them. So it can vary from person to person. It
can become part of your reward and recognition, so somebody is not doing what they're supposed to, you start shrinking them, and then they start feeling that pain and they want to move away from that, ideally.
Yep. Yeah. Cayla, you brought up a point that I don't think we said anything, and we may touch on it afterwards, but you said when you bring on a new person, that's one of the biggest benefits I've had with recruiting and new agents as well. In the old days of round robin, they would have to sit in the loop and wait. So how long are they on my team until they build up a lead flow? And then everything else, where now we're able to have warm, ready leads. So they're, in a sense, able to jump right in. And once they learn our system, right away.
Yeah, I mean, telling a new person that you're immediately going to have access to 20,000 leads, go in and do your worst, that's a really big selling point for joining your team. Absolutely.
It is, absolutely. And I would just add one little extra piece to that. Anybody that's thinking about using that as an incentive, as you should, say, hey, I got 20,000 leads ready to go as soon as you're ready to go. And here's what that criteria, looks like, right? You know your script and you can prove it. And then this, and you go through those things with that person.
Yeah.
It gives them the incentive.
That's a good distinction to make. They've got to be ready. They know your process. They know your policies. They know your, the CINC script. Once they've proven that they're ready, give them access and let them fly. And then, just holding firm to those consequences. If you told someone that, I'm going to take this lead away if XYZ doesn't happen, and it doesn't happen, you've got to hold fast to it, right? Because we're only as good as those, as those agreements that we have with people. Once you start letting it slide, then it's going to be like, well, you didn't do that last time, and it's going to get rocky. So you've just got to make sure you hold firm to those consequences. That's a huge part of it. I want to check in with Mike. Do we have some questions that we could answer in terms of management?
Yes. As far as management goes, a couple questions have come through about utilizing drips and how you let your teams use that communication piece, or if you have it set up at all.
So I think specifically too, I saw one out of the corner of my eye about like the speed to lead drip campaign. Do you guys use drips in the pond and just have them come from the pond account?
Right now, I do believe I have behavioral and speed to lead turned on. Actually, no, I'm sorry. I turned that off because I'm testing out an AI automation, but
I was just gonna say the same thing.
Yeah, we do have an AI beta happening right now. So if you're interested in that, chat with your CINC account manager for that. But
because we've got a couple of externals that we use with ShopBoss, and then, like I said, just testing AI. And I'm not a big drip person on all my regular Google leads. I like drip emails when for the right circumstances, meaning like you come in off a landing page, 5 things buyers needed to know about buying a home. That's a perfect drip email to send to those people because they signed up looking for that information. But when they come into my system as a Google lead looking at houses, what do they want to see?
Houses.
They want to see houses, not all this extra emails. And that's just a quick way to get people to unsubscribe. So we're not a big believer of utilizing a lot of those. Now, past sale clients, yes, we have a campaign in place that we'll use our solds. Bad phone number campaign for those that have a bad phone number, yes, we'll turn that one on. If we're having a conversation with somebody and it seems like they want certain information, then we will add them to a drip. But that's something that we do at the admin level. I look at it like this. For my agents, I want them to focus on selling houses. Prospect, follow up, show homes. And, as far as having to do the rest of the stuff into the system, all that's doing is pulling them away from making phone calls.
Perfect. What else we got, Mike?
I think you briefly touched on this earlier, but we had a question come through about, as you're managing the pond from an admin standpoint, do you have a weekly team meeting? Do you also have individual one-on-ones? If so, what do you discuss and determine that criteria of holding them accountable to the pond?
Doug,
We do weekly team meetings, bi-weekly. Yeah, we're weekly team meetings with everybody, bi-weekly one-on-ones.
Similar, so weekly team strategy session where it's overview of the team numbers and the goals and everything team related, and then one-on-one for each agent. And I try to keep those one-on-ones to 15 minutes, max 30 minutes, just depends on what's going on in that agent's life at that point in time.
Yeah, so tell me, how do you start off those accountability meetings? Is it looking at numbers? Is it asking them a certain question? What's kind of the structure of those?
So just the accountability, ideally, what's on their vision, what's part of their vision board. But when they come in, I like to have the CINC dashboard already pulled up with their leads in front of me. I know what's on their vision board. I might even have them bring the vision board in with them. I have a Google document where I track all the notes from all the previous one-on-ones that we have. And in our one-on-ones, we talk about their next 3 to 5 paychecks. So we know when those people are coming in from last week. And then I ask where those people are at and then who their next 5 are from going forward. I ask them if they accomplished their goal, and if they didn't, how does that make them feel? And then what are they going to do to fix that? And what can I do to help them accomplish their goal? And so I make them reflect on their own performance and, point the finger at themselves as they should be. And so they can move forward. And then we set up the accountability for the next week, so if they didn't hit their goal, they got to perform the accountability they decide for the week before, and then decide the accountability for the upcoming week.
We, so, our team, it's like you said, it's more of a strategy, and that's more, it's more kind of general, just kind of like a state of the union every week to say, hey, here's where we're at with it. Here's where I've seen that was going on. But with the one-on-ones, that's where we like to start off with them to say, hey, do you got anything you want to share with us? How's things going on in your life? And I've kind of taken, so when we first started doing the trainings live, it was just Megan and I. And at the end of every session, Megan would come up to me and say, how did it feel? What felt good to you? What felt off or needed changed? And what was awesome with that one is once I got done, she goes, do you have anything else you want to share? And I said, no, that's it. Do you mind if I share what I've noticed? Yes, please do. And I loved the way she did that because I was able to communicate everything I had felt. If she would have done it backwards, where she came up and just started hitting me with everything she noticed, I would have been like, yeah, I know her. I already felt that. Right. So we kind of do that with them, is we let them go ahead and get all their sharing out, and we'll ask them, hey, over the last 2 weeks, tell us Tell us some of the good stuff that's happened. What have been some of your struggles? What do you think you can improve on? And that kind of lets them now kind of come up with it, almost kind of like the consequences, like Doug had, right? And if they miss something, then that's where they know at the end of them talking, we get to speak up to say, okay, well, we've also noticed this. And then we'll communicate to say, how can we fix this over the next 2 weeks? And then that's also part of our conversation when we get back together with them again.
Perfect. Mike, anything else in terms of managing like this?
It's kind of managerial, would be thoughts on using ISAs with the pond. And I don't know if we want to answer that now or circle back at the very end. And then I have another question that's like 4 that's really involved we can hit at the end as well.
Perfect. Yeah, let's go ahead and touch on ISAs, and then we'll move on and grab that other one at the end.
Okay.
Sure. I mean, I look at it like this. And I get people all the time asking me, well, I got lenders that want to call. Put your best people on the phones, right? I mean, like, you got somebody that wants to learn, get them on there too. But, I mean, ISAs, I mean, if you can afford it, and then it always leads into the question though, all right, well, in-house or, VA, there's no right or wrong with that one. To me, as long as they're trained, they know what to say and they're doing what they're supposed to do. Absolutely. I mean, go ahead. I've used ISAs in the past. We don't right now. I mean, I think it all, how do you want to run your business? Doug says it all the time. How many ways are there to make a shake or a drink at Sonic?
1,000.
I mean.
Yeah. Sorry, I just kind of drew a blank there. The question, ISAs, yeah.
About Sonic now.
So going back to the study, there's principles that we have to accomplish. We know we have to hit speed the lead, right? And we have to do it consistently, right? And ideally we do it at a certain time of day and certain days of the week. We know we got to hit those too. I mean, it's more about consistency. 5 days, 6 days a week, we're pounding the phones. And if it takes ISAs to help me accomplish that, then I'll put ISAs in place. Right now I'm using AI because AI doesn't care what time it is. It doesn't get sick. It doesn't have emotions, and it's, and it hits the lead. So in a way I have an ISA.
It's duplicatable and repeatable.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So.
Awesome. Well, I want to talk a tiny bit about how you two might use the pond account to reward. We've touched on it a tiny bit. And I saw that we had a question before about, do you have multiple pond accounts and how that works? So talk to me. One thing I think a lot of people don't do enough of, especially are call nights and kind of call parties. So can you talk to me a little bit about how you guys might use calling out of the pond to structure one of those call nights?
Yeah. So call nights, way we used to do is one night a week. And usually it was like on a Wednesday or Thursday. We try to hit those peak days and those peak hours from that 4 to 7. And what we do is we'd have people come in, everybody come in, and that was one of our requirements. In order to have access to the pond, you had to come in on that day. You come in, we'd bring drinks and food and stuff. We'd have a little party. We'd have a drink or two before they get on the phones, and we jokingly say it's a requirement before you get on the phone, you got to have a drink. Jokingly, but everybody would have beer, whatever, and then we socialize, and then we do a little bit of role play to get ready, get in the right mindset, listen to some music. We have a cowbell, and then we jump on the phones and start pound the phones during those times. But now I've switched that to where we want everybody in the office around 8 to 10. They don't always get there at 8 o'clock. Some of them roll in around 8:30 or whatever. But during that general time, that's when we're making our calls. And we get tired of that, we'll switch it next week, and we'll go and do some evenings if the team wants to do evenings. So I kind of leave that up to them.
But it's all about making it fun, right? So you guys do, especially during these call nights where it's a special night where you've kind of scheduled in advance. Tell me about like some contests that you might run during that, or how you might kind of incentivize people setting appointments or having great conversations.
We've done, so ahead of call night, Matt and I will build out like call lists in the pond. We'll do some save filters. And, so, and not every call list is going to be the same. So you might have an easy call list, Cayla, somebody that's going to be more susceptible to buy today, where Doug's going to have one that, he's going to have to ask better questions, right? Well, for every appointment that is booked, you might only get 1 point for your call list, where Doug's going to get 2 points. Because it's, we know that his is going to be a little bit tougher with it.
Logged in recently or something
and
like that.
Yeah. And, and then at the end, we'll do, little things like, we've done gift cards to restaurants, spa days, just, AMX cards, just little, just little, day out on the lake, things like that, so just little fun things that, that you can just turn around. And some of the other things that I've seen them, depending on how many points you get, I've seen some of the other teams where, they got, I call it like the Wheel of Fortune, where they spin it, depending on how many points you get, depends on how many spins you get, and you spin it, and wherever it lands, you get that prize. So, there's lots of different, I've seen the cash guns. So, there's all kinds of fun incentive stuff that you can do with it to get people involved. But, the whole idea on call nights, we're the same way. Ours is structured. We get in for about 30 minutes, kind of role play, a little more education wise. And then, and that's where, while we're doing that, that's where we're, eating pizza or barbecue or whatever else. And everyone's having a favorite beverage of theirs. Make sure you pay attention on the beverage intake, because, at some point the conversation becomes deteriorated and it doesn't do you any good. So,
Right.
Those are the agents that you pull off and you say, okay, you need to start cleaning up. But, and it's just having fun with it.
Yeah. Doug, you have some other thoughts?
No, he covered it pretty well. There's just so much, you're only limited to your creativity there to motivate people. And you need to do some research or ask on the CINC page, what kind of contests are you running now? I love theme stuff. I love the Kentucky Derby stuff. When people they'll build a racetrack and everybody gets a horse and they race.
Canceled this year.
Yeah, it got canceled this year, which sucks.
So now we just have to do it virtually.
Right. But
and my outfit hanging up in there ready to go too.
Yeah. So, if you're going to do that, if you're good with that creativity and whatever's going on right now at this time, it's got, at this time of the year, you can design a contest around that to motivate people.
Yeah, and it could even be month-long contests where you let them accumulate points for like a grand prize at the end of the month. Another great idea is there may be people who get off to a slower start and they start to feel like, oh, well, I can't win anything. So they kind of start to just slow down and they don't really care about it. So introducing some prizes like halfway through, 3/4 of the way through. So, the next person to set an appointment, like if you're 30 minutes in, the next person to set one gets this, $100 bill or whatever, just so you're incorporating everybody and not, letting people get discouraged, because it can happen and it does happen.
Yeah. Break it down into quarters. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. So any other thoughts of ways that you have used maybe giving access to the pond as some incentive or just anything I haven't kind of asked you guys about?
Well, it's just that, we kind of touched on that before but if you're not whatever your parameters are for a team, if you have team meetings every week and that's something that is important to you, then the agent needs to be at that meeting in order to get access to the pond. If you have daily huddles and those are important to your team, that could be a parameter that you hold them accountable to. So whatever your accountability measures are, you can tie that to the pond.
And yeah, we've done that where if you don't hit and we didn't do daily, we did weekly dials. If you didn't hit your quota for weekly dials, then the following week you didn't have access to the pond. Now, you didn't have full-time access or unlimited access. If you wanted to be able to make calls that next week, you had to reach out to Matt or myself 12 hours in advance, minimum 12 hours in advance, and say, hey, will you turn the pond on for me? And what we would do is we would turn the pond on at 8 o'clock in the morning, and then it would get turned off at 9:30, which is the end of the prospecting time. And, and we'd go in and we'd monitor to say, hey, were you in there? and we'd look at the number of dials. And because I look at it like this, you got turned off for a reason. So if I turned it on, and so you asked me to turn it on for you Monday morning at 8 o'clock, and then I noticed you didn't show up until like 9:20, and you made 5 dials, how likely am I going to turn it on for you the next morning? And the reason you have to reach out to me is because it's a little more, not really an embarrassment, but it's that, you know, hi Dad, can I go out tonight? Hi Mom, can I, you know, what's my curfew? And so that next day, whenever they reach out, be like, I turned it on for you today and you didn't do anything. So whenever you have more of that, you know, heart-to-heart conversations, then you'll see where the real motivation is.
Awesome. So before we get into our final questions from the audience, what would you say is kind of like your final piece of advice or wisdom, or kind of your final takeaway that you would like everyone who's watching to leave with today?
Do it often.
Yeah, it's probably my favorite tool, or one of the best things that we created in CINC.
It is. I mean, I think, you know, I mean, open mind, right? I mean, everyone wants to find the fault and a reason to not and resist change, and even broker owners, right? So stop that. Like when you find yourself, and I almost wish we could implement this, like anytime somebody comes to us and say, yeah, but it won't work because of this. Like, you know how we have the $2 jar? I almost wish we could do that, like whenever we're talking with other team leaders, to say, but if you could, how would you do it, right? Because there's a solution to every problem. And, you know, and I mean, and Doug and I are great examples of it, right? Our rules are a little bit different in the ponds because we've got 2 different cultures. We run our teams a little bit different. He doesn't have the same issues I have. I don't have the, now we've got some issues that overlap, but for the whole part of it, some of the stuff he does, I'm like, what? No, I've never had that issue. And he's like, yeah, man. And then I'll say the same thing about mine. He's like, what? I've never had that issue. So, you know, I mean, every team's going to be a little bit.
Personalities of your team are
yeah,
really
and
way you
so
manage your pond.
And so what I would, but that's where those, when we first did it, that was where our team meetings were, is to say, all right, well, where's the frustrations this week with the pond? Because, and we say it at training, right? When there's a problem with our clients, where do we shine? Coming up with a solution. So why can't we bring that into our agents as well? All right, where's the struggle? And then though, you know, some of the problems we have to table it for a week so we can think about it. Other ones we'll just turn around and ask and say, all right, well, what are some of y'all solutions? And we'll mastermind it as a team. And then at the end of the conversation, Matt and I will make that final say so. Sometimes it's done right there at that day. Other times we'll put an announcement out a couple of days later. Sometimes it takes us the week to really think about it. But, you know, it's fixing it. And, you know, I mean, I always learn, fail forward, fail often, because we learn from our failures. So that's all we're doing, is just putting our systems in place based off of what didn't work the week before.
Yeah, awesome. So we're going to go to some questions, but I do want to throw out that Joe said for their call nights, they do cash, and then they'll also do highlights of the agent on social media for the day, which I think is great. People love recognition. And for someone that, you know, through coaching, it really thrives, and that's a big motivator for them. I love doing like a highlight of them on social media so they can kind of increase their awareness. I think that's great. And Joe also recommended a book, The 4 Disciplines of Execution, which is actually a book that as a team we've read as well. So that's great if you're looking, you know, for some structure on how to implement some of these things into your team. I think that's a great suggestion. So thank you, Joe. Awesome. All right, Mike, you're up. Throw us some questions, and we've got about 10 minutes left together. So go ahead and let's cover those. What have we gotten to?
So the quickest, easiest one is going to be, how big are your teams?
I have 7 of us in Southwest Florida, but my whole organization, we're several teams across several states. We're at 102 agents, I believe it is. And we all use a version of the pond system.
I've got 6 agents local, and add 7 on top of Doug's number for agents all over the place.
Perfect.
All right.
I want to kind of tie in with that with some of the, so I've had people that come up, and I know it's one of your questions, and you might hit us back on this, Cayla. So if I'm stepping out of line, you can tell me.
I'll tell you.
I know. I've got some teams that we talked with and friends that are running, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 plus agents, right? That's where the multiple ponds come into play. That's where you turn around and you say, hey, you know what? Like, I've got 20 agents. Okay, well, I can run 6, 7 agents out of one pond and be okay. Much more than that, you're going to want to start creating a secondary pond and a third. And for us, it's just a round robin. I know I was talking with Dwayne Murphy a lot in Cabo on his, and he's upwards 40 some agents, and he's created some. But what you have to pay attention to are what agents you put within those ponds, or those little, as he calls them, pods. You don't want to put 2 sharks in the same pod, because 2 sharks are going to just bloody each other up and beat each other up, right? Put a shark in there with some guppies. And what that does is that shark brings the guppies up to their level, right? So
creating that competition between that smaller group.
Yeah, but you put 2 sharks together, I mean, and then you have another pond with just a bunch of guppies. Are you doing your organization any favors at that point?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Perfect. Good answer.
All right. So the second to last question is, who is working the P1, P2 leads? Are they assigned to an agent and sent back to the pond? Or are they just worked out of the pond? How are you working those filters daily with the pond?
Worked out of the pond.
Yeah, kind of like Doug mentioned earlier, Lona will assign those filters to certain agents. So like if it was me, Lance, and Doug and Mike kind of working, I might do P1 and P2. Lance might do P3. Doug might do a separate filter for like some different login criteria. Mike would work another one. And so it's all assigned. So we're not all calling the same leads during that same prospecting window that we're working. So that's a really great question, because that can be an issue. It just takes a little bit of pre-planning, of kind of just plotting out that schedule.
Cool. Okay. So the last question is kind of a multi-part that's been coming in across the whole conversation. Okay. Well, before we do that, we had one more question on, is someone assigned to that filter for the entire day, or do they call that list and then get bumped to a new one?
Well, I think that if I'm reading this question correctly, this is something that we actually get a lot is, well, if everyone in the pond gets alerted that a new lead has come in, won't the lead get annoyed that like 5 people call them at once? And so Lance,
I wish that was the problem. No, and this is why I just mentioned about, like, after you hit a certain number of agents, you need to, and so like, I still think, and theoretically I could probably go up to 10 and feed 1 pond.
Mm-hmm.
After that, you're going to want to go another one. And again, that's going to vary, because maybe if I have 14 agents, then I'm going to just kind of split it. So we got to remember, we're not leaving voicemails. We're not sending text messages. The pond is sending that out. So you've got 5, 6, 7 agents, and they all call at the same time. It's multiple phone numbers. How many different databases is that lead in? And I also want to kind of put on it to say, like, how many of y'all actually are going to have that issue of 5 agents calling at the same time? Because if you have that issue, I want to know your secret that gets your agents to call consistently every single time. I mean, we've been doing this for 5+ years, and even when I talk with some of the biggest teams out there that are crushing it, they all say the same thing. They're like, man, I wish I had that problem. So, I think the biggest thing is real estate's easy. The pond is easy. Selling homes is easy. We as real estate agents want to find reasons to complicate it to try to justify our being, I think. Quit complicating it. Have a little bit of trust that it's going to go in and work. And yeah, don't worry about too many agents calling, because it's multiple phone numbers. I mean, in this call, I've had 14 different calls that have come in on my phone. All different numbers. It could all be from the same organization. I don't know, right? just 14 different phone numbers. They were just missed calls.
Yeah, so, like when Doug was talking earlier, they're all working between the hours of 8 and 10 a.m. to prospect, and that's when they'll assign those filters of for agents to call out of. But throughout the day, any new lead that comes into the pond, everyone with access to that pond gets notified, and whoever is the first to make contact can either claim that lead or, write the notes and say, we had a great call, but they're just not ready to buy yet, and leave them in the pond. So, you've got both, where during that prospecting time, we're calling out of certain filters, but the rest of the time, new leads come in, everyone can have fair game at it.
Well, that's something to think about too. And I don't think we touched on this one. What do we do with the leads that we contact in the pond, but nobody claims?
Yeah. Do you guys put reminders on those leads? What happens there?
So yeah, every lead, I look at it like this: unless it's one of our buyer loss opportunities, working with an agent, has an agent, already bought a house, we've got our list that we share at CINC. But I feel that every conversation that we've had with somebody, there needs to be a reminder no more than 30 days out, depending on what their time frame to buy is, right? Well, so Doug's a lead in my system, and I used every one of my scripts, and he's like, dude, I can't move there for 12 months because, and it's a valid reason, right? His motivation's not going to change. So I got to nurture him for the next 12 months. Doug is not a lead I want to assign to one of my agents right now, because that's not one of their next, that's not one of their next paychecks. So we're going to leave him in the pond with the follow-up. So then this ties back to my question with Doug early on when he was like 100 dials, right? Those are prospecting. And then there's going to be follow-up. So throughout the day, everyone has time blocks to do follow-up within the pond. Just because I had the initial conversation with Doug doesn't mean in 30 days when his reminder is due, you might be in there doing follow-ups, and you might reach out and have a conversation with Doug. I put good notes in there. You're going to read the notes. But guess what? Somewhere in the 30 days, his situation changed, but you asked him better questions, and you booked an appointment, and he wants to come meet with you because he's thinking about buying in 60 days now. Mm-hmm. Whose opportunity is that now? Is it mine or is it yours?
It's mine. It's always mine.
Yeah. But, when you look at it, like, you're the one that asked better questions and booked the appointment, right? So, but here's, that
really ties into having that right culture on your team, where we're not so cutthroat with each other that you're going to get angry.
No, because here's what's going to happen is because it's all going to flow through, and what's going to end up happening is a couple days later, I'm going to be on the phone talking with somebody that you initially contacted. Mm-hmm. And
there's enough
I'm going to turn around and absolutely. It all ends up, weighing out for itself. I did see somebody that asked a question way at the beginning about, the way we split it. Sometimes if I maybe book an appointment and have my agent show, yes, there's a completely different commission structure for that. And I was already built out that way because I've always broke mine down. Certain percentage goes to the company on company leads. And then I broke it down into who booked the appointment, who did the buyer consultation, who showed the house, and who wrote the contract and handled the contract to close. Each one of those has a percentage that's tied to it. And so for us, it's worked out pretty easy that way to be able to split it and move forward.
Yeah, before we get to the big question, I've seen a couple of quick ones that we can jump in on. Someone asked, is the pond best for 2-agent team with 7,000 leads? Absolutely. Have yours assigned to you that you're working, one-on-one, everything else in the pond? Absolutely. Alicia asked, if a lead comes in at midnight, do you have a cutoff time every evening? So you guys are not, what's your cutoff time for making prospecting calls on new leads?
Well, we've called people in the late hours and scheduled appointments. It's just, I typically wouldn't want agents calling past that 9 p.m. It's just normal, like prospecting, common courtesy hours.
Like phone etiquette.
We're 8 o'clock for ours. But I look at it like this, and I tell everyone, and again, this isn't, when I say some stuff that, like I give advice, it's not always what exactly we do, but it's just having that bigger picture of other teams and what I've seen. If I call you at 10 o'clock at night prospecting because you just came in, that opens the door now for that lead to bother me at 10 o'clock at night. So you got to ask yourself, if I call you right now, is it going to be acceptable then for me throughout the rest of our relationship to have you call me at that point, or is it not what I want? So, you know, we practice work-life balance, you know, I mean, that's, so for us, 8 o'clock is the cutoff time per se. You know, I don't discredit them if they miss a call or don't call a lead back at 8:30. If they want to, that's on them. But 8 o'clock's our time, 8 to 8.
One that I'll ask before we go back to Mike, how many new leads do you guys average per day? In other words, he's kind of asking, you have a certain amount of agents, how many leads are you trying, like what's your goal generating number per month?
Good rule of thumb is 30 leads per month per agent that's on your team. Yeah.
So that was 30 leads per month.
I second that.
So if you've got 3 agents, you're going to try to generate at least 90 leads a month.
At least. Yes. And I wouldn't balk at 40, you know, but somewhere around
well,
that. There is a too much, but you don't want.
Well, I mean, I agree. I disagree. It depends on what kind of business you're kind of running. And I'll use Shane as a great example. Back years ago, when I was really tracking my conversion, I was running a little over 4%. And then I met Shane. And I actually went down into his office and we were talking, and I mean, and they were crushing it, and he was only about 2% conversion, but he was selling 4 times more homes than I did. So I was like, does conversion really matter, right? But his goal, now his market's a little different. He's in a little more smaller point, but he was like, I want data. I want to own everybody in my market's email address and phone number. So he had a different mindset and plan with it. And since then, I mean, we've opened up to say, you know what? Yes, but you know, Nashville's a bigger market area, right? I mean, kind of like Atlanta. Like, could you imagine trying to manage all of the data for everybody? It's the same thing for us, right? So, you know, when you generate, because when I generated too much, I look at it to say, you just dropped a truckload of dirt off of my driveway, and I got a shovel that I got to move it to where it belongs, but you just went back to get a second truckload. If I can't have it moved by the time you got back, at what point do I get overwhelmed and say, I'm not touching them enough? So again, you got to look at it. So we look at, you know, teams with limited resources, 30 leads per month per agent. And that's like a solid 30 leads. That's some people with good phone numbers, some people with bad phone numbers, some with good emails, some with bad emails. I mean, that's just a roundabout. Yeah, because over time, it's all going to average out. I mean, theoretically, between my 2 websites, I've got probably 35, 40,000 leads. I jokingly say I don't need to spend another dime on leads right now, but that's not true because you still always got to be injecting
top grade. You know,
yeah, absolutely.
All right, Mike, hit us with that multi-parter, and that'll be our question to take us out today.
Okay, so looking at structuring ponds, I know we kind of hit around this topic along the way. They were talking about structuring a pond where you have a pond for like leads that are 90 days or newer, another pond for 91 to 180, and then one that's 180 and beyond. Lance, I know you kind of set this structure up.
Those are separate ponds
versus ponds.
Yeah, those. When I had said that, those are saved filters. That's not ponds. I don't think so. We used to have multiple ponds, and we do it by area, price point. But what we realized when we would do that is, and I'll use Tim McGraw and Faith Hill's house as an example, Franklin, Tennessee. It's been on the market for $18.8 million. And agents or leads would come into my system and they would start looking at that house and then a $15 million house. Well, when I had a luxury type pond set up, those leads would fall in it. But then after they got done daydreaming and they ended up throwing around and going into their 200,000 to 300,000, like they weren't in the right spot. Same thing with location wise. You know, they might be looking in Franklin initially is what brought them into our site, but then as they start looking at it, they ended up in Hendersonville, 2 different areas. So we eliminated that to say, you know what, we don't want to mess with that anymore. And this is like, I go back to with Dwayne, he's got multiple ponds set up, but he round robins to his ponds. And then at that point, we go in and we filter. So I've created save filters, much like the P3 for prospecting for my agents, is their attempted contact, their registration date is over 15 days, and then their last login is 31 to 60. And then another one that's 61 to 90. And all it is it's just breaking down into little segments, because these people are still looking, right? They just quit using our website. So not different ponds, it's still one main pond, just different filters for us to go in and break it down.
Perfect.
Is there another part that we need to cover, Mike?
No, that was it. I was just trying to figure out how to structure it, if that was going to get enough of the question answered or not. But I think that covers everything.
Well, if you are still with us, and many, many of you are, you've just spent the past hour and a half with us, and I want to send a big thank you for carving out that much time of your afternoon. A huge thank you to Lance and Doug for taking that much time out of their days as well. Doug, I hope your car is ready for you to drive home soon. Just truly thank you guys so much for sharing your expertise with us, and know that you can always reach out to us with more questions if you have a follow-up. Your CINC account manager is a great resource as well, but also know that the CINC Owners Mastermind group is a great place for you to go and ask these high-level, how do I implement this type of questions. There's ton of people there willing to jump in and help you. It really is a passion for a lot of them, is to try to troubleshoot and problem solve and get it working the way you'd like it to. This was recorded, so you will get an email that has this recording in there, and you feel free to reply to that with any questions. If I personally can't answer it, I'll pitch it to Lance or Doug or someone else on the team, and we'll get you all set up. Any final words from you guys, Lance and Doug?
Thanks for having us on with you. And for everyone out there, I mean, just do it. Don't overthink it. Just get out and do it. I think that's been the biggest game changer for me, is instead of sitting there just like, should I, shouldn't I, contemplating, we take a quick 30 seconds and say, you know what? We're seeing success. We're going to go out and do it. We're going to fail and figure it out.
Yep. Yeah, we're here to help you. So go get it.
Yeah, go fishing.
I like that.
Nice little razzle dazzle at the end.
Doug, is that you in your scuba gear behind the shot?
Yes. Yeah, I'm in there.
Really, we appreciate you all very much. Thanks for being here. Have a great rest of the day, a great weekend, and go to cincommunity.com/webinars for other webinar opportunities throughout the month of April. We'll have May dates up there pretty soon. So thank you so much. You're appreciated. Have a great day. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.